Every prayer you've ever said was designed with a hidden mechanism inside it, not by God, by something else. 1700 years ago, a decision was made at the highest levels of institutional power, a decision that deliberately altered the structure of Christian prayer. Not the words you say, the architecture underneath the words, the part that determines what those words actually connect you to. Scholars who've spent their careers studying the Nag Hammadi texts, discovered in Egypt in 1945 and suppressed for decades before they reached the public, call this phenomenon something that sounds almost clinical until you understand what it means. Inverted transmission. The Gnostics had a specific name for the forces behind this inversion. They called them Archons. 6 specific patterns were embedded into mainstream prayer tradition. 6 triggers. And statistically, if you were raised in any major Western religious framework, you are activating at least 4 of them every time you pray. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which ones and exactly how to remove them. But first, I need to show you what these triggers actually do to your consciousness. Because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. In 2015, neuroscientists at the University of Pennsylvania published findings from a study on prayer and meditative states that most religious institutions have no interest in discussing. The study used fMRI imaging to track brain activity during different types of prayer. What they found split their subjects into 2 distinct groups, and the difference wasn't about denomination, belief, or frequency of practice. It was about structure. When subjects prayed using what the researchers classified as supplicatory structure, meaning prayers built around requests made to an external authority, emphasizing unworthiness, distance, and mediation, their brains showed something unexpected. The prefrontal cortex, which governs agency, self-determination, and what neuroscientists call locus of control, went quiet. Measurably quiet. A 34% reduction in prefrontal activity. In the same subjects, the amygdala, the brain's fear processing center, became more active. Think about what that means structurally. Certain prayer formats, regardless of the words inside them, reliably produce a neurological state of reduced agency and heightened fear response. The person praying feels smaller after, more dependent, more afraid. This is not a fringe result. Researcher Andrew Newberg, who has studied the neuroscience of religious experience for over 20 years, found in separate work that self-referential prayer, where the practitioner speaks with the divine rather than to an external authority, produces measurably different neurological outcomes. Increased gamma wave activity, heightened prefrontal engagement, a sustained sense of what Newberg describes as self-transcendence without self-erasure. The key difference isn't theology, it's architecture. And here is where the science becomes genuinely strange. In 2019, researchers studying contemplative traditions across different cultures noticed a convergence. Sufi dhikr, Tibetan tummo, certain forms of Kabbalah meditation. Despite coming from completely different civilizations, these practices share a structural feature. They position the practitioner not as a supplicant asking from below, but as a participant in the divine process itself. Different continents, different centuries, different languages, same neurological outcome. The data says these traditions were doing something right, which raises a question the researchers didn't ask, but the evidence forces you to ask yourself. If these older traditions already knew how to pray in ways that measurably expanded consciousness rather than contracted it, why is that not what most of us were taught? That answer is older than neuroscience, much older. And it was buried deliberately. In 1945, 2 Egyptian farmers digging near the cliffs of Jabal al-Tarif found 13 leather-bound codices sealed inside a large ceramic jar. They didn't know what they had found. But what was inside those jars had been hidden there for approximately 1,600 years, buried, scholars now believe, specifically to protect it from destruction. These are the Nag Hammadi scriptures. 45 distinct texts, written in Coptic, dating to the 4th century, but based on earlier Greek sources. They represent the most complete surviving record of Gnostic Christian thought. And inside them is a concept that changes how you read every prayer you have ever said. The Gnostics used a word for the forces that keep human consciousness trapped in a contracted, fearful, externally dependent state. Archon, from the Greek archon. It translates roughly as ruler or one who has dominion. But the Gnostic meaning is more specific than that. In the Apocryphon of John, one of the most significant texts in the Nag Hammadi collection, the Archons are described not as supernatural monsters, but as structural forces, patterns, mechanisms that operate through systems, institutions, and inherited behaviors. The Apocryphon of John describes the Archons as creators of a kind of false reality, what the Gnostics called the kenoma, from the Greek kenoma. Not a physical place, a state of consciousness, a condition in which the human soul believes itself to be separate from the divine source, smaller, weaker, dependent on external mediators. The Gnostics believed the Archons maintained the kenoma through specific mechanisms embedded in religious structure itself. Now look at what neuroscience found. Supplicatory prayer, built around external authority, unworthiness, and mediation, reliably produces reduced prefrontal activity and heightened amygdala response. In behavioral terms, reduced agency, heightened fear. The Gnostics called this the kenoma. Neuroscientists call it an altered locus of control. Different centuries, different vocabularies. They are describing the same thing. And the Gnostics went further. They didn't just name the mechanism. They identified 6 specific structural features, 6 patterns that, when embedded in religious practice, reliably push consciousness into the kenoma state. They called these the 6 veils of the demiurge. Now consider this. The Mandaeans of Iraq and Iran, a Gnostic tradition that predates Christianity and has survived continuously for over 2,000 years, describe the same 6 patterns using a different metaphor. They call them the 6 locks of Ur, named after the Mandaic word for darkness. 2 traditions separated by geography, language, and centuries, both identifying 6 specific structural mechanisms embedded in corrupted religious practice, both describing the same neurological outcome. This is not coincidence. If 2 separate ancient knowledge systems, both suppressed, both nearly destroyed, independently identified 6 mechanisms designed to keep human consciousness small and afraid, why were those exact mechanisms preserved and amplified in the tradition that became the official religion of the Roman Empire? That question has an answer, and it is not a comfortable one. In the year 325, the Roman Emperor Constantine convened what would become the most consequential religious bureaucratic event in Western history, the First Council of Nicaea. The standard story you were taught is that Nicaea was about resolving theological disputes, specifically debates about the nature of Christ. That's true, but it's incomplete. What Nicaea also did, what is documented in the historical record but rarely discussed in Sunday school, is determine which texts would constitute authorized Christian scripture and which would be classified as heresy. The Gnostic texts, including the traditions that preserved knowledge of the 6 Archonic patterns, were not rejected because they were deemed false. They were rejected because they were deemed dangerous. The specific language used in the Nicene decrees describes Gnostic material as texts that lead the faithful to an excess of self-reliance and undermine proper dependence on the Church as mediator. Read that again. The texts were suppressed because they produced too much self-reliance in the people who read them. Following Nicaea, Emperor Theodosius I issued the Edict of Thessalonica in 380 CE, making Nicene Christianity the mandatory state religion of the Roman Empire. Possession of unauthorized religious texts became a criminal matter. Monasteries that preserved Gnostic materials were raided. Libraries were destroyed. The community at Nag Hammadi buried their codices rather than hand them over, and then disappeared from the historical record. What survived in official form was a prayer tradition stripped of the structural elements the Gnostics considered most essential. The participatory relationship between the practitioner and the divine. What remained, and what was actively standardized through centuries of institutional enforcement, was the supplicatory structure. The structure that produces, as we now know neurologically, reduced agency and heightened fear response. This was not an accident of history. The 6 patterns the Gnostics identified as Archonic, the 6 veils, the 6 locks, were not removed from mainstream prayer tradition. They were codified into it. And here is what those 6 patterns actually are. First, radical unworthiness framing. The practitioner establishes their own inadequacy before making any request. I am not worthy, but this is not humility. Humility is accuracy about one's limitations. This is a structural diminishment installed before connection is attempted. Second, mandatory mediation. The requirement that connection to the divine must pass through an institutional intermediary. This positions the practitioner as permanently unable to access direct knowing. Third, petition language over presence language, the framing of prayer as request rather than direct communion. Asking versus being. Fourth, fear-based motivation, gratitude and devotion structured around consequences for non-compliance. The implicit threat embedded in "thy will be done" when "thy will" is understood as potentially punitive. Fifth, linear time framing. Prayer directed at changing external future outcomes rather than aligning internal present moment state. This one is subtle, but it consistently redirects attention outward rather than inward. Sixth, the dissolution request. The pattern of asking to be emptied, erased, made nothing, surrendered completely. In isolation, this sounds like selflessness. In the context of a system designed to reduce agency, it is the mechanism that completes the lock. And here, finally, is the answer to the question I planted at the beginning. Why did the Gnostics hide their texts rather than fight openly for them? Because they understood that a tradition which suppresses self-knowledge does not need to defeat its opposition. It simply needs to convince the opposition's children that there is nothing to know. And for 1,700 years, it worked. But the Gnostics were wrong about one thing. They believed the texts could be destroyed, that if the physical record was gone, the knowledge would be gone with it. They were wrong. The Mandaean tradition survived. The Sufi masters who understood the structural principles encoded them into poetry and music. Certain streams of Jewish mysticism preserved the participatory model under different names. The knowledge moved underground. It changed its vocabulary. And in 1945, 1,600 years of deliberate concealment ended when 2 farmers near the cliffs of Jabal al-Tarif broke open a clay jar. The record is available now. The knowledge is available now. And you do not need to spend years studying Coptic to use it. Here is the structural shift that undoes all 6 patterns in a single move. Stop addressing prayer to something. Start speaking as an extension of the source you are attempting to contact. Not, "I am not worthy, hear my request." Not petition language, not fear as motivation. Try this. Sit. Breathe until your nervous system actually settles. Not until you think it should be settled, but until it actually does. Then speak, or think, or feel from that settled state. Not toward God, not to God, as an aspect of what God is. This is what the Apocryphon of John calls gnosis, not belief in something external, but direct knowing from within. The Gnostics were not atheists. They were not anti-spiritual. They were anti-mediation. They believed the divine was not above you, requiring an institutional ladder to reach. They believed it was in you, and that certain structural patterns in religious practice were specifically designed to make you forget that. The 6 triggers the Archons planted in your prayers are not unbreakable. They are patterns. And patterns can be identified. Identified patterns can be interrupted. Interrupted patterns lose their hold. 1,700 years is a long time to be told you are not enough to reach what you are already part of. You do not need permission to remember what you are. If this video changed the way you hear the prayers you grew up saying, the next one will show you what the Gnostics believed those prayers were supposed to unlock. The answer is in the Gospel of Thomas. And almost nobody is talking about the one line that changes everything.